All right, good morning. Lesson 11.7. All right, so the last lesson, 11.6, dealt with the vertical shift, the A value. What we're doing now is we're introducing the last of the values when you graph, and that's called the B value. But we have a lot of information to go over. We're going to do a little bit of review in the top part from the previous lesson, 11.6, and then we're going to introduce B. So a lot of information. You really need to write this down to understand how to graph by hand. Again, I have this little note on the bottom and I want to almost cross it out, but you'll see it anyway. It says if you use your calculator, you must be in radian mode. I would not use your calculator yet. Trust me on this one. It's not hard to graph these. It's like riding a bicycle. Once you get it, you get it. As long as you have the basic understanding of these values here and what a basic curve looks like, what a cycle of the sine curve looks like, what a cycle of the cos curve looks like. Okay? All right, so let's talk about review from the other day. The A value is a vertical dilation, so it's the number in front. It changes, again, remember the min, the max, and the range. Those are all tied together. The A value is called the amplitude, but remember, it has to be absolute value. I don't know why it's in there, because the amplitude is always positive. So sometimes they'll give you a trick question and they'll say, what's the amplitude? And the A value is negative. And some people just pick that negative value as the amplitude, and that's not true because the amplitude is height. You can't have negative height, right? Just like you can't have negative distance, right? In geometry, you would reject any kind of negatives. All right, going back to the C value here. The C value, again, is just like the A value. It affects the min, the max, and the range. And it's called the midline. And that helped us graph, right? The midline of your trig curve. All right, so now we're on to B. B is different. Look, B is located next to the X value. All right, and the B is A. It's going to work opposite of the A and the C. A and C were vertical. The B is a horizontal dilation. Okay, so now we're affecting the width. It will stretch. So think of like a slinky. You have the slinky regular, right? You pull it out really far, right? And it's got like a nice wide curve, but then you can smush it in and your curves would be smaller and more compact. That's what that B value affects. Okay, it's also called the frequency. And the frequency, which is your B value, tells us some cool things. What it tells you is how many complete cycles you will see from 0 to 2 pi. So if you were able to look at a graph from 0 to 2 pi, the number of complete curves or complete cycles you'll see is that B value. So if this was a 2, in between 0 and 2 pi, you would see 2 complete cycles. It's all going to come together. Just follow my lead here. Trust me. All right, frequency is most helpful to determine something. What it determines, you use the B value to determine the period of a sine or cosine curve. Now, the period is the length of one cycle. So the B value is not the length of one cycle. You have to use it. Now, you use it in a formula. The formula to find the period of any trig function, sine or cosine, would be 2 pi over that B value, okay? And that will give you the length of one cycle, how far wide it goes. Now, this next part, spacing of the curve. All right, each cycle of a sine or cosine curve can be cut into or split into 4 increments, 4 evenly spaced increments. To figure out what we label by, now this is new because the last last lesson, 11.6 and 11.5, our x's were, our x-axis was labeled already. What we're doing today is figuring out what those values are. So to figure out how to space your graph, everything you have to label along the x-axis, you take that period you just found and you divide by 4. Okay, so with graphing trig functions by hand, it's a lot of laying things out and then the curve falls in place. Okay, so take that all in, take a sec, make sure you have this all filled in. If not, and I'm turning the page, you can always look at my key that I post online. Okay, so for example 1, we're not going to graph yet. We're just going to get used to figuring out our amplitude, our maxes and our mins and our midline. That's old. And then introduce the frequency and the period. Okay, so looking at example 1a, we have a sine curve, y equals 2 sine 2x. So our amplitude, remember, is going to be the absolute value of 2, which is 2. Our max is going to be a positive 2. Our min is going to be a negative 2. Now, there's no C value. So if there's no C value, my max and min stay the same. Your midline is going to be exactly what that C value is. It's 0. So y equals 0. Now, what's new? Our frequency and the period. Frequency is that B value. Your frequency is going to be 2. The period is going to be 2 pi over your B value. So 2 pi over 2 gives you pi. So from start to finish is pi units. Okay, if you were talking degrees, pi is 180 degrees. So 180 degrees from start to finish of that sine curve. All right, and we're just doing some information. We're not graphing yet. That comes in example 2. All right, so now looking at our letter B, we have a negative cos curve. We have a B value, that's 2/3. Let's see how that plays out. All right, amplitude, it's a negative 1 for our A value, so our amplitude is going to be a positive 1, which means our max is going to be a 1, our min is going to be a negative 1. No C value, so my max and min stay the same. Since there's no C value, your midline is y equals 0, which is the x-axis. Your frequency, all right, B value, 2/3. All right, now this is where it's going to get tricky. It's 2 pi for the period over your B value of 2/3. All right, this is annoying. So what I suggest is you don't run for your calculator. You think about it in elementary school terms, right? 2 pi divided by 2/3, right? Divided by 2/3. All right, keep it, change, and flip. Keep, change to multiplication, and flip. That's going to give you, when you multiply your fractions, 6 pi on top over 2, which simplifies into 3 pi. So good old-fashioned elementary school division with fractions. 3 pi is your period. Okay? All right, let's see how we do with this next one. This C, let me just make sure we're totally in here. I'm going to slide over. All right, our letter C, for example 1, now all of a sudden we introduced our midline. So that's going to affect our maxes and our mins. It's not going to affect the frequency and the period. So your A and C values, like the 5 and the 1 here, that affects your height, your range, your Y values. That here, your B value, affects your frequency and period. Okay. All right, so let's bang out this amplitude. The absolute value of 5 is 5. So normally our max would be 5, our min would be negative 5. We have a shift up of 1. So up 1 gives me a max of 6. Up 1 gives me a min of negative 4. Our midline is going to be our C value, y equals 1. And our frequency, all right, this is a little tough for you guys to see off my video, but you should have it in front of you anyway. If I was to rewrite this, see that x over 4? That's a fancy way of saying 1/4 x. So now it's easy to see your frequency, your B value is 1/4. All right, so this should be interesting again when we go to compute the period, because it's 2 pi divided by 1/4. So we're going to write it out. 2 pi divided by 1/4. So I'll switch to pink. Keep, change, flip. That's going to give you 8 pi on top, 1 on the bottom, 8 pi. That's your period. Okay? So that's your information part. So what we're going to do next is we're actually going to find that information again. And we have a beginning graph of 3 cos x. So again, 3 cos x, midline is y equals 0, up 3, down 3. We are going to graph on that grid 3 cos 2x. So what did we do that changed? This here, this 2. That's going to change horizontally. Now, a 2 here is going to squish, and you're going to see more cycles. Because from 0 to 2 pi here, which this is 0 to 2 pi, right? 0, I see a 2 pi here. I see 1 complete cycle of cos, which matches that 1 here. Now I have a 2 here. So from 0 to 2 pi, I'm going to see 2 of these in half the time. So it's going to make it scrunched in. All right, let's, before we jump in, let's actually compute all the information we did in example 1. Our amplitude is going to be 3. Normally, our max would be 3. Our min would be -3. There is no C value, so maxes and mins stay the same. Midline is y equals 0. Your frequency is a 2. So the period is 2 pi over 2, which is a pi. Now, this is where it's really important. Your x scale. Remember, the x scale is your spacing. Okay, so you take the period and you divide by 4. So the period is pi, and I divide by 4, which means 1 cycle has 4, say, slashes. I hope that makes sense. You'll see when we look at the graph. We are anticipating like 1 cycle, 4 slashes, right? So we start here, it changes position 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Now, we are going to graph our y equals 3 cos 2x, which our frequency is 2. So now we're going to see 2 cycles, which means 2 times those 4 slashes, or 8 slashes. And that's from 0 to 2 pi. So we're just going to concentrate from 0 to 2 pi, and then this part will fall into place. So now, here's the thing. We need 8 slashes. I only have, from here to here, I only have 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're going to divide each one in half. And you know what? You're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay. Now, so set up slashes, and you're going to count by the x scale. All right, so this is going to be a little annoying. We do have some stuff labeled. I'm going to talk you through it. All right, so my x scale is pi over 4. So you're going to label everything from 0 to 2 pi, but in terms of this pi over 4. So watch me for a sec. This first slash, okay, away from the 0, is 1 pi over 4. The next slash, which is labeled pi over 2, it's pi over 2 because this is 2 pi over 4. 2 pi over 4 reduces into pi over 2. This next slash, 3 pi over 4. The next slash here is technically 4 pi over 4, which is a pi. And then you have 5 pi over 4. Then this one here, which is already labeled 3 pi over 2. The reason it's 3 pi over 2, because it's 6 pi over 4, and that reduces. This next slash here is going to be 7 pi over 4. And the last slash is going to be 8 pi over 4, which reduces into 2 pi. I know this seems a little bit crazy. In the negative direction, it's going to be exactly these values, just negative. So this guy here is negative pi over 4. This here would be negative 2 pi over 4. This is negative 3 pi over 4. Negative 4 pi over 4. Negative 5 pi over 4. Negative 6 pi over 4, which is reduced. This is negative 7 pi over 4. This is negative 8 pi over 4, which reduces into negative 2 pi. All right, we know our amplitude is 3, so we're going as high as 3, as low as negative 3 off of the midline. So your graph is not going to change height-wise. It's going to change this way. So you have a positive cos curve. A positive cos curve starts at the maximum. So you're going to the right of the y-axis, you're going to have 2 of them. So 1, 2. That's what it should look like. I'm going to put it in green so you guys can see. All right, so starting point is the same. So we're starting as high as 3. We're going to go to our midline, which is the x-axis, but we're going to do that at the first slash. So this is going to be 0. So max 0. We're going to go down to our min 0, and then at pi, back up to max. So I've completed one cycle from 0 to pi. Look at your period. Your period is pi. So that makes sense. But I have to graph the second cycle. So I'm up here at the max. Remember, we go to 0, down to the min, back up to 0, and then to the max. So I should see 2 cycles, right, from 0 to 2 pi. There's one cycle. There's 2 cycles. Okay. Now let's go in the other direction. Now this is from 0 to negative 2 pi. So again, we're at our max. Remember, cos goes max 0, min 0, max. Let me write that down. Max 0, min 0, max. Now remember, those zeros are your midline. Okay, it's just too long to write the word. All right, so I'm at my max. First slash 0, second slash min, next slash 0, next slash max, 0, min, 0, max. All right, so we're seeing more of those cos curves. So a couple of things. Your height didn't change, right? Your maxes and your min stayed the same. We said we would see 2 curves from 0 to 2 pi. That's this increment here. So we saw 2 cycles here. This is also from 0 to 2 pi. It's 0 to negative 2 pi. You're going to see the same amount. It's very symmetrical, graphing sine and cosine. What else can we talk about? Oh, the fact that I'm doing these in pens. I got burned in the last lesson. You guys should probably be graphing in pencil. I do like the colors, though, to make things pop. There are erasable colored pencils. I've bought them in the past. Probably nobody has them. However, it's food for thought. When you're new at graphing, the pencil is like your BFF because you are going to make mistakes, okay? We're all human. I make mistakes too. So anyway, this is your basic impact of the B value. Okay, let's see what the next chunk brings us. Okay, so now we're changing it up a little bit. We're sketching the graph. Y equals 2 sine 1/2 x. So we do have an A value. We do have a B value. There is no vertical shift, no C value. We just want one full period to the right and to the left. Okay, so you're not going necessarily from 0 to 2 pi anymore or negative 2 pi to 2 pi. We just want one full period to the right, one full period to the left. Okay, so let's kind of figure out where we're at. And again, you're not just going to be able to throw this up. You're going to actually have to, crud, I think I'm going to run out of a little bit of room. You're going to have to be able to lay this information out, label up your graph, and then everything falls into place. So a couple of things. We have a sine curve. A value is positive, so it's going to go 0, max, 0, min, 0. A full period to the right and left of the y-axis. All right, so if this was the y-axis, right, that's a y, by the way. Awful y. we want to go one to the right and one to the left. So if I do a sine curve, remember sine starts at 0, max 0, min 0. That's going to be one to the right. And then if I'm at 0 here coming off of the max, it's going to go min 0, max 0. This is the left. Remember, it's continuous, okay, like a roller coaster. All right, so that's what I need to put on here with legit values. So again, our amplitude is 2. No vertical C value, right? No shift. So 2 and negative 2 is our max and min. Our midline is our C value. There is none, so y equals 0. All right, new stuff. Frequency 1/2. So normally I would see 1/2 of a cycle from 0 to 2 pi. So this is where 2 pi would be, half a cycle. All right, that's food for thought. That's going to make sense when we figure out the period. The period is 2 pi over b, which is 2 pi over 1/2. Now, I don't know if you guys heard this before, but dividing by 1/2 is like multiplying by 2. Let me show you. 2 pi divided by 1/2, right? We keep, we change, and we flip. So dividing by 1/2 is like multiplying by 2. So 4 pi is your period. So one cycle to the right, that's going to end at 4 pi. So your number here should be 4 pi. Remember, there was a little formula for the x scale. That's the period divided by 4. This one's nice and easy. 4 pi divided by 4 is pi. So remember, one cycle, which is what we're graphing, one full period, you have 4 slashes. 4 slashes to the right, 4 slashes to the left. And look, we have those 4 slashes kind of there for us. So 4 to the right, 4 to the left. And we have to label them. And you always count by the x scale. Okay, so ready? You're going to do your slashes, 4 slashes per cycle. So depending on how many cycles you're graphing for or what your b value is in the context of the problem, you lay that out. You count by the x scale. That's what we're up to. All right, our x scale is counting by pi's. So 1, 2, 3, 4 slashes, they go up in increments of pi. So 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. All right, we said that this ending point should match your period. Now, if we're labeling to the left, they're just negative. Negative pi, negative 2 pi, negative 3 pi, negative 4 pi. All right, so we're labeled. We want to go, our max is 2, our min is negative 2. So I have a 2 here. I have a negative 2 here. All right, so you count by the x scale. Step 3, you can label the max and min just to keep yourself focused. And now we're going to fit in the curve. Remember, sine curves with the positive. 0, 0, max, 0, min, 0. That's your pattern. Okay? All right, so sine curve, we're going to graph the one to the right. We start at 0. We go up to our max, which is 2 at the first slash. The next increment, the next slash, we go back down to 0. We go to our min. And then we go back up to 0. One cycle to the right. Okay, so now look at how you're going, your pattern. 0, min, 0, max, 0. That's counting it backwards. If I'm at the max, 0, my next logical place is the min. Back up to 0, up to the max, back down to 0. We have this part of the graph. And look, it connects. There's no like a symmetric view over the y-axis. It's just a continuous flow, okay? No mirror image is what I'm trying to say. So you matched your original picture, right? The one that we had, just a quick kind of sketch. We made it legit with these values. And that's a beautiful graph. All right, so now here's where, we put on our big girl pants or big boy pants, and we graph example 4. You have a negative A value, you have a vertical shift, you have your frequency is a half, so there's a lot going on, but we can do it. So let's actually set up I'm just gonna slide it over. The box of information, all your important information. Once you have that done, the rest falls into place like it did up there. So amplitude, all right, our A value is a negative. However, our amplitude is the absolute value of -1. So we have an amplitude of 1, which normally with no C value, max would be 1, min would be -1. Your midline is right here, the C value. So that means your midline is y equals 2. And what it's going to do is it's going to add 2 to both your max and min values. So add 2. Our new maximum is going to be 3. Add 2. Our new minimum is going to be 1. So we're going to fluctuate between 3 and 1. Midline is y equals 2. All right, our frequency is a half. So lucky for us, we did that before in this example. So the period is 2 pi over a half, which gave us 4 pi before. Our x scale, the period divided by 4. So this is nice. 4 pi over 4 is pi. So we made it nice and simple like the last one. Let's kind of figure out what's going on. We want one full period again to the right and to the left. One full period is 4 pi. We're splitting it up in increments of pi units. So remember, one period is 1 cycle to the right, 1 cycle to the left. So we're going to do our 4 slashes to the right and left. 1, 2, 3, 4, conveniently done for us. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go up in increments of pi, just like we did before. So 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. Negative pi, negative 2 pi, negative 3 pi, negative 4 pi. All right, we know that we're going to go as high as 3, as low as 1. I mean, you can label those values, so you know you're going to fluctuate in the height there. Laying out this graph, a couple of things before we jump in. We have a coast curve, it's negative. A negative coast curve starts low and then goes up to the max. So if I was going to set up my rough sketch of what I got going on, you have your coast curve, it's negative, it's starting down here. It's going to go to the midline, up to the max, midline, minimum value. That's a 1 cycle to the right. And then you have to go to the left. So I'm at 0, my min. I go up to 0, my max, my 0 or midline, and then my min. So that's going to get me my curve to the left. So that's what I should have in the very end on this. Now we have it all laid out. So we want to graph the midline here. So we did step 1, we did step 2. We did step 3. Step 4, let's put our midline in. Y equals 2. So at y equals 2, I'm just going to put a dashed line. Now remember, don't get so hung up on what the final values are. Just think of the amplitude when you have the midline graphed. So remember our coast curve, that's negative. We're going to start at the minimum. The minimum is from the midline, so 1 unit below. And then it's going to go to our midline, our max, our midline, and the minimum. Okay, so this is to the Rosie. The first to the right, that's 1 cycle, and then to the left. So I'm at the min, I go to my midline, go to my max, my midline, and my min. And that, my friends, is your beautiful curve. All right, this is a long lesson, loves. All right, let's see. All right, example 5. Let's see how much information we can do. Bust it out. And then thankfully, example 6, whew, gives us a multiple choice. All right, so let's see. Example 5. Oh, this one's a little weird, and I like that it's here. We have a sine curve. We have a negative a value, which means our sine curve is going to dip to the minimum. So it's going to go 0, min, 0, max, 0. Our b value, all right, our b value is pi over 3. So this is really interesting. When you have a pi up in the equation, you're not going to have a pi in the period. So your period is just going to be a regular old number, okay? So pi either appears in one or the other. It appears either up here. If pi is up here, no pi in the period. Let me flip back. Up here, there was a number in the b value. We had a pi in the period. Number in the b value, pi in the period. So it's in one place or the other. All right, so this is actually going to be a cinch to graph. Your amplitude is a positive 2. Our max is 2. Our min is negative 2. We do have a midline of y equals negative 1. That's going to impact our final max and min, which again, you're subtracting 1. So that's 1 here. You're subtracting 1. That gives you a negative 3 here. That just kind of is a check. You know after you graph it that your maximum was a positive 1 and your minimum was a negative 3. Okay, that's kind of like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, your midline is negative 1. All right, your frequency, remember this is different. You have pi over 3. That's your b value. So the period is 2 pi over 3. So again, we're going to talk about keep, change, flip. We're going to hit it elementary school. There's no harm in that. 2 pi divided by pi over 3. Is 2 pi, keep it, change it, flip it. All right, so now your pi's cancel. So the period is going to be 6. Okay. Now setting up the x scale, that's the period over 4. So 6 over 4, when you reduce that, that reduces into 3 halves, which I'm sure you guys like better as the decimal version, which is 1.5. So remember, you're graphing one full period to the right and left. So 1 cycle to the right, 1 cycle to the left. 4 slashes this way, 4 slashes this way. We're going to count them out by 1.5 or 1.5. So this is pretty cool. The first one, 1.5. When you add another 1.5, you get 3. Add another 1.5, you get 4.5. Add another 1.5, and you get 6. Totally makes sense because that's your period. We're going to label it in the negative direction. So negative 1.5, negative 3, negative 4.5, and negative 6. So life is good. You are pretty much laid out. Let's draw in our midline. Our midline is at y equals negative 1. So I guess I'll keep with the green here. So at negative 1, draw in your midline, dashed. Okay. We could say, all right, I know I'm going as high as 1, as low as negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. So that should really confirm that we're going to fluctuate in between. All right, let's talk. We have a negative sine curve. So remember, it's going to go like this, right? 0 min, 0 max, 0. Or 0 midline, min, midline, max, midline. Ew, I hate the midline. I like it with 0 better. All right, so let's kind of lay this out. Sine always starts at 0. So I have this point here, but remember it's shifted, so it's starting at the midline. Okay, so I'm here. Now I am going to drop down to my minimum. My minimum is going to be 2 below my midline. Okay, 2 below my midline is here. Makes sense because I'm at negative 3. And then I go back up to my midline, up to my max. My max is up 2. And then back to my midline. And that is 1 cycle to the right of a negative sine curve. All right, so now let's go back. Let's do the other side. So look at your pattern. 0, max, 0, min, 0. The next logical place is going to be your max, down to your midline, down to your minimum, back up to your midline. And that is 1 cycle to the left. Okay, continuous flow, nice and pretty like a roller coaster. All right, last question, thank God. All right, this is a long one. Holy cow. All right, so if we were in class, we'd be 35 minutes in. All right, last question, thankfully, is nice and easy. Let's see what we have here. Multiple choice question. The heights of the tides can be described using this format here. So it's a cosine curve, your A, your B, your C. Now, high tides are separated by 24 hours. All right, what would give the frequency of the curve? All right, so you have a high tide, right? It's a coast curve, so it starts at the max, right? It goes to your midline, goes to your minimum, goes to your midline, goes to your max. So this is one cycle of a coast curve, okay? We're not talking any specific values. This is just one value. This is your high tide. This is your low tide. This is back to your high tide. So if you're going in between high tides, that's one period or one cycle. Now, you got to figure out what the B value is, okay? Now, the B value comes from the period. The period has a formula, right? It's 2 pi over B. And we want to solve for this B. Now, we know that this length is 24. So the period, no matter what this is going to come out to 24. So you have your equation. So the first thing you're going to do, if you're looking to find B, you take your period formula and set it equal to the given period. So we have our period formula, and we set it equal to the given period, which is 24 hours. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to cross multiply, which we all love to do, and solve. Okay, so let's see, 24 times B equals 2 pi. We want to solve for B, so we divide by 24. And we get this, B is 2 pi over 24. We're going to reduce that into pi over 12, which is right here. A couple of little tricks. Remember I said your pi is going to show up either in the period or in the B value, one or the other. So they told you the period was 24. So that means your period is 24. It has a number. The B value is going to have a pi in it. So with that being said, that would be excluded right away. Just a little bit, like sometimes you can eliminate 2 answers. So that's the end of my lesson. Remember, your B value talks about horizontal. We've now thrown everything together. So life is good. We got a little bit of shifts in there. We got some compressions, some stretches. This definitely comes into play next year in pre-calc in a big way. So make sure you know this. Go through the homework. I'm looking at the homework right now. What I would do is, honestly, on the first page, so I'm looking at the homework here, maybe pick a few to do, maybe pick 2 to do. Definitely do all the multiple choice questions. Those are really important. And then I would definitely take a look at 6 and 7. There's only one graph on here. I would definitely make sure you know how to do it. But again, I'm going to post everything on there. Good luck. And I'm signing off right now. So have a good day. Hopefully the sun's shining. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.